In a frantic hospital room, alarms are blaring, nurses are rushing, yet an 8-year-old boy crashes in, barefoot, panicked, yelling, "Turn off the machines. If you want Hannah to live, turn them off now." Freeze frame on his tear-streaked face. Across the bed lies Hannah, unconscious, tubes everywhere. Standing by her side is her father, Richard Hale, a wealthy businessman, and behind him his new wife, Emily, stone cold. The doctor hesitates. But how did this poor, frightened boy know Hannah? Why was he begging her father to do the unthinkable? That moment cracks a family's perfect facade. Before we dive deeper, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear. If you're new here, click subscribe so you never miss our upcoming stories. Richard Hale stood at the foot of his daughter's bed, a man who once commanded boardrooms, now reduced to silent desperation, watching the steady decline of 14-year-old Hannah, who had been in a coma for 6 long weeks. Every day, the doctors spoke in careful tones, urging him to consider letting go, reminding him of insurance limitations, guardianship technicalities, and medical protocols that sounded more like quiet pressure than care. Beside him, Victoria, his polished, graceful new wife, kept an unsettling calm, her eyes never lingering on Hannah for more than a second, while Dr. Carter, the neurologist in charge, delivered updates with a cold detachment that made Richard's skin crawl. And then there was the unknown boy, a shaking, malnourished child no one recognized, insisting Hannah wasn't gone, insisting they were all wrong. Everyone claimed she was brain dead, except this boy. What did he know that they didn't? Richard stared at the boy, torn between disbelief and a growing fear he couldn't name. The room had quieted, the doctor watching with irritation, Victoria with tightly folded arms, but the boy's trembling voice didn't waver. He stepped closer to the bed and whispered something so personal, so specific, that Richard felt the breath leave his lungs. It was a promise Hannah had made to him only the night before the accident, a small father-daughter secret about what she wanted for her 15th birthday, a moment no one else had been present for. Hearing it from a stranger, especially a child who looked as though life had given him nothing but hardship, shattered every certainty Richard had relied on these past weeks. His expression cracked, memories flooding in, doubts rising like a tide he could no longer hold back. How could this boy know something even Victoria and the doctors had never heard? And why did he look at Hannah with the kind of fear only truth carries? The moment the boy's words hit Richard, Victoria stepped forward with a sudden urgency that startled even the nurses. Her voice, usually smooth and measured, tightened as she told the boy to stop talking, insisting he was confused, lost, or coached by someone trying to take advantage of a grieving family. But the nurses had seen enough worried parents and enough medical cases to recognize when something didn't sit right, and one of them shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Victoria and the trembling child, as if sensing a truth no one wanted spoken aloud. Richard noticed it too. The fear in Victoria's eyes wasn't concern for Hannah, it was fear of what the boy might reveal next. Before he could question her, Dr. Carter signaled for security, his orders sharp, practiced, and far too quick for someone supposedly invested in finding answers. 2 guards stepped in, and the air in the room tightened as the boy backed away, still whispering Hannah's name. As security moved in, the boy reached out instinctively, brushing his small hand against Hannah's. For weeks her vitals had stayed painfully unchanged, a flat pattern that kept Richard trapped between hope and surrender. But the moment their hands connected, the monitors flickered, shifting in a subtle but unmistakable rhythm. A nurse leaned forward, eyes widening, whispering that she had never seen Hannah respond to any external stimulus, not once in 6 weeks. Richard felt his heartbeat pound in his ears. Dr. Carter quickly dismissed the readings as a technical glitch, urging everyone to ignore it, but his voice carried a strain that didn't match his calm expression. Richard, exhausted yet alert, stared at his daughter's hand and at the boy standing beside her, a child who had nothing and no reason to lie. Doubt began unraveling inside him, weaving through every conversation, every rushed recommendation, every moment he had been told to give up. What they didn't know was that Hannah had tried to warn someone long before the accident. Before the coma, Hannah's world was a mix of soft, ordinary moments and quiet worries she tried to hide. Richard remembered Saturday mornings in the kitchen, where she danced barefoot on the tiles while he flipped pancakes, laughing at her own terrible singing. She'd talk about school, her art projects, and the small things that made her day brighter, but her smile always dimmed when Victoria walked into the room. There had been tension, nothing explosive, nothing loud, just a steady discomfort she never fully explained. Richard noticed how she grew quieter around her stepmother, how she avoided certain conversations, how she clutched her backpack a little tighter on the days Victoria offered to pick her up from school. Later, Richard discovered Hannah had started keeping a small diary, a place where she wrote down her thoughts when she was too afraid to share them out loud, a place where she recorded things she didn't want anyone, not even him, to know. The boy finally gathered the courage to explain how he knew Hannah, his voice unsteady but sincere, as he described the quiet corner of the internet where their paths first crossed, a support group for kids carrying more weight than their age should allow. He spoke of long nights typing on an old borrowed phone, searching for anyone who might understand the loneliness of sleeping behind grocery stores and under bus stops, and how Hannah was the first person to talk to him like he mattered. She encouraged him to stay in school shelters, sent him links to food banks, and reminded him that his life wasn't over just because the world had been unkind. In return, he became her confidant, the one she trusted when things at home felt confusing. He said she often hinted that she was scared of something she couldn't name, and one night she made him promise that if anything ever happened to her, he wouldn't let her be forgotten or silenced. Hannah had whispered her fear to the boy late one night, her words trembling even through the text messages. "There's something wrong in our house. I'm scared," she had written, a confession heavy with worry she couldn't voice to anyone else. She didn't explain, only hinted at a tension that made the walls feel smaller, the rooms colder, and her steps quieter. The boy tried to reassure her, offering advice and comfort from hundreds of miles away, promising that he would always be there in spirit, even if he couldn't be there in person. But neither of them knew just how real her fear would soon become. The quiet dread Hannah carried, the anxiety she tucked into her diary, was about to collide with a day no one could have prepared for, and the boy, despite his promise, would be forced to act in ways he had only imagined. The night of the accident was a blur of headlights, screeching tires, and a mother's frantic shout. But the dash cam told a different story than Victoria's carefully rehearsed version. She claimed Hannah had wandered out of the house, careless and impulsive, but the footage revealed a hesitation, a glance back toward the sidewalk, a pause that suggested fear rather than recklessness. Hannah hadn't run blindly, she had stepped into the road with purpose, as if following an invisible thread, a message only she could see. Richard watched the replay in stunned silence, the reality settling like ice in his chest. The boy, sitting beside him, clenched his fists, murmuring that he knew why Hannah had stepped forward, but revealing it meant exposing something far bigger than anyone in that room was ready to face. At the hospital, the tension only deepened. Victoria insisted on a strict no-visitors rule, turning away relatives and friends who had hoped to offer comfort, her calm demeanor now laced with a quiet, commanding authority that even the nurses made uneasy. Dr. Carter, meanwhile, continued to press Richard with a clinical detachment, speaking in measured tones about the benefits of ending life support, citing protocols and prognosis as though Hannah were a case study rather than his daughter. Richard felt trapped between the man who once gave him confidence in every business decision and the woman whose composure now seemed almost unnatural, leaving him questioning not only the care Hannah was receiving, but the very motives of those he had trusted to protect her. Every suggestion to let go gnawed at him, while the boy's eyes never left Hannah, silently pleading that someone listen to the truth he had come to reveal. Late one evening, a nurse approached Richard cautiously, glancing over her shoulder before lowering her voice. "Hannah, she squeezed my hand on day 2, she confessed, her words barely above a whisper, but Dr. Carter told me never to mention it, said it would complicate things, that it wasn't relevant." Richard's stomach twisted. For 6 weeks he had been told his daughter was unresponsive, brain dead, a patient whose life depended entirely on machines, yet here was proof, hidden in plain sight, that Hannah had been aware, communicating in her own subtle way. Questions surged through him.
Why would a doctor dismiss a sign of consciousness? Why instruct the staff to hide it? And most unsettling of all, what could Victoria be trying to protect or conceal while the girl he loved was trapped in a body that wanted to respond? Richard's world began to fracture as layers of motive emerged, each one darker than the last. Life insurance policies had been updated just months earlier, and if Hannah were to die, Victoria would gain complete control, millions of dollars hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter's own interests were no less troubling. Years of research had left him desperate for a breakthrough, a neurological case that could define his career. Hannah, young and previously healthy, was the perfect subject, and her coma presented an opportunity he could not ignore. The boy, sensing the weight of the truth, played a voice note Hannah had recorded just before the accident. Her trembling voice echoed through the